Okay. So in the last session, what we discussed? Prepayment. Okay. We created prepayment invoice. Where we noted that, yes. So we have seen how to create the stand invoice, debit memo, credit memo, mixed invoice, and the prepayment. What is the process involved in the prepayment? Also we discussed, and we have gone through the prepayment statuses. Before validation of prepayment, status is unvalidated. Okay, never valid status is applicable for stand invoice or debit or credit other invoices. For prepayment, the status will be different, that is unvalidated. After validating the prepayment invoice, status is unpaid. Okay, unpaid. After payment, available. After using that prepayment, status is fully applied. When you create the prepayment invoice, okay, which distribution set we have to use? We no need to use any distribution set. Reason? We discussed. You should remember. You have to be ready with that. Why we should not use distribution set in case of prepayment? Okay. You're paying advance. That is reason no distribution. Huh? Come on, yeah. What a good answer. I respect it, but not correct. See, at least whatever you discuss, you should remember, right? I'm not asking. Please guess the wonderful answers. I'm not asking. I'm just asking whatever we completed, which you attended, which I explained. At least if you are not interested for that minimum basic things also, it won't work what you are expecting. So we are giving that prepayment account in the financial option that will be copied to supplier side. When you create the invoice, prepayment invoice, system will copy from supplier side to invoice. Normally what we discussed, the liability account system will take from supplier side in normal cases. But in case of prepayment, the liability account as well as prepayment account, both system will take from supplier side. Since both the debit and credit entries it is taken from supplier side, you no need to give any distribution. That is the reason we discussed as a no distribution required. And you no need to enter manual distribution, or you no need to select distribution set also. Okay. Then we created it's all about prepayment invoice, and we create a stand invoice. We applied prepayment invoice on stand invoice. We verified the status, right? And we created process wise. We created prepayment invoice. We processed the payment for prepayment invoice. Then we created a stand invoice by taking the case as we procure something from supplier. Then finally that prepayment amount we applied on the invoice. At the same time, we have seen how to unapply the prepayment invoice. Also, we discussed. Okay, we just done with all these type of invoices. Now we'll see the invoice type called as interest invoice. Okay, now we'll see what setups required. This is what, right, we discussed about prepayment, right? Right. So interest invoice. So already we discussed. What do you mean by interest invoice? Anyone? You are clear on it. It's not like some words will be throwing on others. It's not like that. You have to give the proper statement. Yeah. Anyone, please. Yeah. What simple answer? I don't need. You'll be telling too much. Not required. Simple answer. Over. Game is over.
In case of late payments,
yes.
If interest is applicable,
yes, yes. When you are making the late payments, if interest is applicable, how can you say applicable or not? We'll set if for that supplier is, if supplier is asking to pay interest in case of late payment, that is applicable. Even if you are paying the late payments, if supplier is not expecting the interest because you have such kind of terms with the supplier, you have good relation or whatever. Okay, so in that case, that means that point only you are saying. In case of late payments, if interest is not, if interest is applicable, system will create interest invoice. That's it. Okay, when you are making the late payments, if interest is applicable, system will create the interest invoice with interest amount. That clarity you should have. But how much you will practice, that is secondary thing. At least you have to practice 2 times. But you may not practice also sometimes. If you can deliver this information, that's more than enough. Later you can practice. But do practice also, please. Okay, that's very, very important. That's very, very simple way. If you are able to present any concept, that's more than enough. That shows your experience. Okay, interest invoice. To implement the same functionality, we have to do certain setups in the system. We have to set up certain setups in the system. We'll go and do that. Sorry. Okay. So what setups we have to do in the system? Make a note. In payable options, we'll be having one tab called as interest. Under that, we have to go on to setup that. Say set payable options for interest invoice. Means interest invoice related options will be having within the payables. That will be setting. After that, for which supplier generally will charge interest if you are going to make the late payments, for that supplier you have to enable as create interest invoice. Say enable. See, whatever the points I'm telling, go with the same sequence and remember each and everything. Okay. So enable create interest, enable create interest invoice at supplier. What I'm saying, supplier. I'm not saying supplier site. Notice that point also. We'll be enabling this create interest invoice at supplier level, not at all site level. Okay, we'll create it only, we will enable at supplier level, not at site level. The third setup is say create or say define interest rates. So I'll use the term as define. Simple say set interest rates. These are the three setups we have to perform. Now we have to make the late payment. We have to make the late payment. If you want to make the late payment, what we have to do? There should be some invoice which is outstanding already. I mean, overdue. Overdue only late payments, right? That means if I create invoice today by taking the immediate payment term, then you have to pay when?
Immediate.
Immediate if you pay no interest, right? But you want to pay interest. Then what you have to do? You have to pay after tomorrow or after 1 week. So we cannot wait to calculate interest invoice to see interest invoice 1 week. So for that reason, for this testing purpose, what I'll do, I'll create one invoice with the past date. Maybe this month first. Okay, I'll create invoice with 1st November. And I'll give the payment terms as immediate within that invoice. So that system will take due date as today's date, right? Today's or tomorrow's? Same date. 1st November only. I am creating invoice on 1st November. I am giving immediate means 1st November only it will take as a
Payment.
due date. It will take due date. Then we can make the payment with the today date. Then system will count. It has to be paid on 1st, but we are paying on today, and there is 23 days late. Okay. So overdue, like late payment for the period of 23 days. So system will identify these 23 days. It will calculate the interest. With that interest amount, system will create the interest invoice. Okay. So this is for our testing point of view. We are trying to understand these points. But reality, when you are working, what happens? There will be already invoices which are overdue. Whenever you make the payment, accordingly, system will calculate. Okay. What is the process for interest invoice means? Don't say we have to create the invoice past date. Please don't say that. That's for our understanding. The reality, what is the process for interest invoice? Simply you can say the process is when you are making the late payments, if interest is applicable, system will calculate interest. This is a statement you have to deliver. Okay. Don't say past date you create today something. Immediate payment term we have to give. Remember, we have to give immediate payment terms for interest invoice, interest purpose and all. That is not the logic or some concept. Okay, just for our text execution, we are going to follow the process. Reality, the process is when you make the payment, if it is late payment, system will calculate interest. Okay, so these are the setups. To understand the process, what we'll do is to create the one invoice, a standard invoice with past date. Okay, but here only just for testing, but reality, normally they will be creating invoices. Create invoice with the past date with immediate payment term. So using immediate payment hub. Then create payment. Let's say process payment. Just say process payment means today only will be doing. Anyway, say process payment. Once you may process the payment, system will prompt us saying that on this invoice, it's a overdue invoice, interest is applicable. You should say yes only, not no, right? Since applicable supplier is asking you are paying, it has to be, that should be applicable. So you will be saying okay, then based on that interest amount, system will create interest invoice. Then system, not we, system will create interest invoice. That's it. This is what we have to understand. First point is simple. Generally, four points, very primary. Any concept you take. First point is what is the concept? What is the purpose of the? What is the interest invoice? You should know. That is the first point. Second point is to implement that solution. Normally, whatever you are doing, interest invoice means that is you can call as solution. Interest invoice solution. Whatever you are doing in the system, that you can call it as solution. Client will be asking, we need solution when you are making the late payments. Interest system has to calculate that. Just they will be expecting as a, that is one of the solution for their business process. So here to implement interest invoice solution, okay, when we are implementing anything, what first point, what is that you have to understand. You know what is the meaning of interest invoice. That is the first point. The second point is to implement the solution, what are the setups required. Notice this point, this is very important. First point is you should understand theoretically what exactly the purpose and all. The second point is to implement that what setups required. In certain concepts there may not be setups, that also will come across, we'll see, but for most of the concepts will be, there will be some specific setups. We created stand invoice. Is there any stand invoice specific setup? No, we have payable specific setups. We completed payable setup, then stand invoice can be created directly. Okay, fine, that's it. So but when you are talking about interest invoice, these are the setups need to be done. First point is theoretically you should know what is the concept. Second point is setups, and third point is process. The fourth point is reports anyway we'll see, means you just done it with everything. You want to know how many interest invoices you have, how many interest invoices you paid. In that case we have to run the report. That also will be covering. Other point is for the process related transaction you should know the accounting entries. And finally where the data will be storing, that also will be discussing. But very primarily remember what is the concept, what setups need to be done, and what is the process. Primarily these 3 points you have to get ready for everything. The rest of things is definitely those also important. For each and every transaction, what is the accounting entry system will be triggering, say generating. The other point is by running which reports you can see the relevant data, and the data will get stored in which table. In every application, what are the activities transaction you do, that will get stored in the database. That also I'll start showing you the invoice data where it will be stored and all. From today or tomorrow session I'll be start showing whatever they will create. When we create invoice, where it will store. When you create payment, where it will store. That I'll start explaining. When you create supplier, where it will be storing. Minimum the basic tables we should know. What are the tables where this data will be stored? The tables we call as base tables. Simply you can say payables base tables. Payables base tables. The payables related data will be stored. Okay, there is some concept called interface tables, that also will be discussing. We have as part of our course content. Okay, we'll see that. Clear, right? Any concept, what is that theoretically you should know, what setups required, and what is the process. These are the 3 primary. Along with that, accounting, what are the accounting entries. Anyway, we will be covering for complete payables and P2P cycle. We will give accounting entries. At that time you make a note and you remember. So what is accounting? I can ask you, when you create interest invoice, what is accounting? And you should be able to answer. Otherwise, I know what is interest invoice, I know what are the setups, I know the process, only I don't know accounting. Business says we need only accounting. Client says we need only accounting, boss. You know all those things are not required for me. Accounting only I need. If they need accounting, you have to help them accounting first. You should know these. Then only actual accounting will come into picture. So that's reason everything important for us. Okay. So accounting entries, you have to focus on each and every transaction. Again, the interest invoice information, if you want to see in the system, which report you have to run, and then finally where the data will get stored. Generally, simply you have to understand where invoice information will be stored. That can be stand invoice, debit memo, credit memo, expense memo, all information will be stored in the same table. Simple. Where invoices information will be stored, you have to understand. That's a simple task you can learn within 5 minutes. Okay. Just notice this point. The same logic you have to apply for everything. You have to check from your side. Okay. Whether you are okay with it theoretically about the concept. Do you know the setups are not properly? And do you know the process or not? And accounting entries are applicable for the process. Account generally for most of the cases, definitely accounting entries are applicable. So what is accounting entry? And how to see that information when it is there in the database by running which report you should know, and finally where that information is getting stored. These points are very important. Just remember these 6 points. What are the points? Theoretically you should know. Second point, theory, setups, process, accounting, reports, wastage. If you go this approach, you will be expert. But of course, we are not going with the basic approach also. There is no chance because you are not doing at least presentations. Okay, it's very important. This is what where we have to focus to work as a functional consultant, any functional, finance or anything. Theory means concept. I mean to say, just written as theory. That's all about concept, business case, which is scenario. To implement that, what setups required? Once you implement, what would be the process? Once you do the process, which accounting will get generated? Once you create accounting entries, or maybe with or without accounting, you can see the reports anyway, where the data can be populated and how to see that, and finally where the data will be residing, which table, and all. You should, if you know this for every concept, you just will become master in that. Okay. Generally, most of the people will be focusing on the setups only. I think that's what I can say because theoretically you are not answering properly. And process also, I don't know, you may do in the system, but theoretically you should be able to explain. These three we are not covering now. Once we complete the application payables, I'll give you all the payables related accounting entries and I'll give you all the reports, I'll give you the tables and all. But at least this stage you should be okay with these three areas. Okay, that's very important. So please focus on that. Okay, fine, clear, right? These are the setups and this is the process. Let's go and see that system. First, what is the first step? Set up payable options for interest invoice. So we have to reconnect. I don't know, by this time it is becoming very slow. Maybe many people are using internet here. Let's see, if not responding, we'll connect to other channel. Okay, so what is the navigation? Setup,
Options.
options,
Table.
payables options. Navigation is setup, options, payables options. So we want to do setup related to interest invoice, right? Go to interest invoice tab. There will be tab called as interest. Here we have. Select interest tab. Select interest tab. See, when you are working on any future, any setup or anything, if you want to just what level of knowledge you require now, and on that base I'm taking the classes. If you want to refer something and if you want to explore more on specific thing, what you can do is, on which form you are in, you can click on that help, so that the form related help will be open. So this is which options? Payable options. If you want to understand any information, just click on help, window help. The window, the form related help will be open. Payables option. What is the purpose of payable options? What are the different tabs we have? And what is the meaning of each and every? Here we have a interest. Click on the big stories there. You can read and enjoy that. Okay. But before that, you do practice first. At least you complete that. If you start doing this, you will be next month also will be in the payables, or else will be standing in GL only. So don't start reading this first. Whatever we discuss based on that, you complete. Once you complete, when you are practicing second time, just you go through it. I don't recommend to read each and everything. At least read first 2 3 lines. Enough. You'll get good understanding about the concept. Okay, fine. Okay. Under interest tab, okay, what you have to just enable this allow interest invoice. Here, if you are enabling allow interest invoice, the meaning is for this business operating unit, for this operating unit, you are enabling interest invoice. That means in this operating unit, yes, we do calculate interest for the late payments. That is the meaning of that. So within this operating unit, you create invoice for any supplier. If interest is applicable supplier level, it will get calculated. Even if you said for this supplier interest is applicable, but if you don't do this setup, supplier level interest is applicable. First of all, in your operating unit is not applicable. Then it won't get calculated. Remember, it should be applicable. Okay, there should be practice of calculating interest in our operating. Then only what are the supplier interest is applicable, it will be calculated. If you say supplier it is applicable, it's not applicable for my organization, then how it will be applicable and how is system get interest involved? That is the point. Okay. Fine. Now here say minimum interest amount. So in your organization, what would be very minimum interest amount to create the interest invoice? I'll say there should be minimum 100 rupees. Okay. We don't want to create interest invoice less than 100 rupees. The printing cost only will be maybe 2 3 rupees and all, right? So just the documentation, the people will be working on the transaction, etc. That may be costing more than what you just pay. So that's the reason there may not be practice. Okay, where you will be calculating interest if it is going to be less than 100. Now, when you create invoice, what is the accounting entry? The expense account will be debited, liability will be credit. That's what we have seen. But since it is going to be interest related, so that you have to give separate accounts to capture that interest related information separately. You can give the accounts like interest expense account and interest liability. Liability nothing but payables. Interest payables you can give. Those accounts you can select which value set we are using for account. For account, which value set we are using? Operations account. Few people never answer. I don't know what is the great advantage of it. Okay, account. Select the same account. Interest expense. Okay, interest expense. Say okay. And here you can give interest liability. Liability means interest liability or say interest payable. Actually, the account name they given as interest payable. Select it. Okay, interest payable. Say okay. So this is setup we have to complete it. Payable options. Okay, in payable options, you have to complete this setup to implement interest calculation and save it. Save and close. Okay, save and close. Now, what is the next setup?
Create interest at
Enable create interest invoice option at supplier level, not site level. Remember. Go to supplier. Or the navigation to supplier.
Supplier.
If I open, then it will come up.
Supplier.
We are in payables.
suppliers entry.
Suppliers
Entry.
entry. So you have find your supplier. Against which supplier you want to calculate interest for late payments. Find that supplier. Who is our supplier?
User authorization organization.
Fusion
Organization.
organizations. Find the search for the supplier. Click on go. Okay. Now what we want to do? We want to enable create interest invoice checkbox for the supplier, right? To set up that, say simple, find the supplier, just give the name and click on go. It will open directly supplier window, supplier page. Now left side we have many hyperlinks, right? Which are related to different options related to the supplier. Go to invoice management hyperlink. Click on invoice management hyperlink. Just click on invoice management hyperlink. Just click on invoice management hyperlink. Click on invoice management hyperlink. Okay, click on invoice management hyperlink. Okay, now here it's open. You can see one checkbox called as create interest invoice. How can you say that this is a header level or site level? Because site is there in the below, right? Here we have site. That means the below information is site. The above always header. That's what. So if you enable this option here, it is applicable for all sites. Okay, all sites. Fine. Supplier is same. Any site normally supplier is that kind of supplier. Will charge interest. So definitely it's applicable for all. Then enable create interest invoice and say save. Okay, enable create interest invoice checkbox and save it.
Sir, could you please explain the point once?
What?
But when you enable the point, create interest invoice,
Hmm.
how can it appear in all sites?
Because supplier level is there, it is applicable for all automatically. That's how they built the law. Okay, fine. Then what is the next step?
Define interest rates and
We have to set the interest rates. Take the navigation. Say create interest rates or set interest rates. Any term you can take. So define interest rates. Anything you can take. So set interest rates. Take the navigation. Setup. Sorry. Payments interest rates. Setup payment interest rates. Okay, navigation is setup
payments interest.
payment interest rates. Open this interest rates form. See here already default rates are there. Okay. So when you are working fresh environment also there will be some default information as per your requirement. What interest rate should be applicable that rate you can give. So I'm going to give 14%, and that 14% should fall within the current period. Current period means that we have to be within the just limit of 2 date. Before, we have to make sure that current period or these dates are falling in the between from on 2 date. We are giving here 2016 to, I may give 31st December 2000. Yeah, we'll go with the 16 only. Till this year end, the same rate is applicable. And the system drawback is we cannot set interest rate supplier wise. Generally, every supplier will have their own rates, but that function is not available in our system. That generally, when you are doing the implementation, we'll do some with some workaround. Something like supplier level, you can enable the DFF, and there you can provide which rate is applicable for that supplier, so that system will be taking. Otherwise, we'll do some customization where you can manage all supplier based interest rates in the centralized form environment. And what is the DFF and all, we'll be discussing, we'll be covering that concept also. But for now, this is the point. Here, supplier wise, you cannot set any interest by using the standard functionality. This is one of the drawback you can understand. Okay, save it, but don't tell to someone. So we have a good drawback in our tables. Okay, we tell them we have a great futures in payables. Anyway, they'll come to know if something is there. Save it. Okay, then close it. Done. Next,
Create a standard.
we done with the setups. Now we have to see the process. To understand the process, since there is no option for us to use the existing invoice, let's go and create the new invoice with the past date by giving the immediate payment terms. Right? The same already we listed the same and we are following. We completed these three setups. Now, just we are going to create a standard invoice with the past date. Okay, navigation is invoices. Okay. Entry.